time to stop swallowing that blue pill of corporate manipulation and remove the blindfold to a world not fabricated and mind-controlled by the media.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Step into the light. Discover the truth. It's time for a reality check.
Reality check. Reality check. Reality check. This isn't something you need to be afraid of.
Now, two of the most controversial views of the paranormal, as well as conspiracies, you'll ever hear. The hosts of Reality Check, Jessica Johns and Joey Mirabella.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to week 7 of Reality Check. I'm Jessica Johns, sitting here with my awesome co-host, Joey Mirabella. How are you?
Oh, stop, Jess. Just had to butter me up before show.
Well, we've got a really crazy, and we say this every week that we have a crazy show, but this one might get us into a little bit of a tussle.
A tussle? Or trouble for those that don't use the word tussle.
I said tussle.
But we are going to be getting into Justice Antonin Scalia, and he has been the topic of discussion for a few weeks now. He was the U.S. Supreme Court Justice from 1986 until his death, which was just a few weeks ago, February 12th or 13th, one of those days. They didn't identify the exact day because they found him supposedly in his sleep.
They found him in his day clothes from the night before.
In his day, right. He went on his hunting trip, right?
Yeah.
So early in the 1970s, he served in the Nixon and Ford administrations, mostly as the Assistant Attorney General. He was also the first Italian-American justice.
Yay, Joey.
That excites me as an Italian-American. So there's going to be a good amount of history in this episode. I have to explain a lot about the federal government, the Federalist societies, and federalism, to use all the F's, the triple F's, we'll call it.
In other words, we're going back to government class, senior year of high school, guys.
There's going to be a lot of history.
Think back.
Yeah, prior to us getting into his death, we have to know what he stood for, where he came from, and how the government had gotten certain kinds of power up to this point that we're in right now. So basically, while teaching at the University of Chicago, Scalia became one of the first faculty advisors of the Federalist Society. This is very crucial. The Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy Studies, or which it was known as the Federalist Society, is an organization of conservatives and libertarians seeking to reform of the current American legal system in accordance with a textualist or an originalist interpretation of the Constitution. Now, for those of you that don't know what originalism is, it's a principle of interpretation that views the Constitution's meaning as fixed at the time of enactment. So the quest is to determine the meaning of words and statements that can only be changed by the procedures in Article 5 of the Constitution. What is Article 5 of the Constitution? This describes the process whereby the Constitution may be altered, and this would be proposing an amendment or amendments and followed by ratification. So for amendments to be passed, either by Congress with a 2/3 vote in both the House of Representatives and the state, or by a constitutional convention called for by 2/3 of the state legislature, right? So this is what kind of keeps amendments from in check. This has to do with bills being passed through the president so that it keeps everything checks and balances. That's our government. But this is what the Federalist Society was one of the things they stood for. Okay? So it's one of the most influential legal organizations. It's played a significant role in moving the national debate to the right on the Second Amendment, campaign finance regulation, state sovereignty, and the Commerce Clause. It plays a central role in networking and mentoring young conservative lawyers. Right-wing politics. They're trying to. This is the main goal of this society is to move the views to the right. What is a right-wing politic? You've heard this a million times. Just to get into the nitty-gritty details, basically says that some forms of social stratification or social inequality are inevitable, natural, normal, or desirable, which defends this position on the basis of natural law, economics, or tradition. Hierarchy and inequality may be viewed as natural results of traditional social differences or from competition in market economies. So according to the concise Oxford Dictionary of Politics, in liberal democracies, the political right opposes socialism and social democracy, and right-wing parties include conservatives, Christian Democrats, classic liberals, nationalists, and on the far, far right, it even includes racists and fascists. So the Federalist Society, there was an interesting book written by Michael Avery and Danielle McLaughlin And they wrote that every federal judge appointed by both President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush was either a member or an approved by members of the Federalist Society. So they pretty much call the Federalist Society primarily a group of intellectuals. In quotes, I use that. The Bush family. Jess.
Yes.
Yes.
The Bush family.
The Bush family. We know that there is a lot of corruption in the Bush family. Now, many choose to believe this, many choose not to. The information's out there. I don't want to get too much into that, but just know the fact that they're pulling tons of people into, or had been over years, from their society says a lot. There's a reason why this government wanted to take control this way. What is federalism? Okay, federalism in the U.S., the constitutional relationship between the U.S. state governments and the federal government of the United States. Since the founding of our country, and mainly the end of the American Civil War, power shifted from the states and towards the national government. Why did this happen? Well, for one thing, the Articles of Confederation allowed the Continental Congress the power to sign treaties and declare war, but it could not raise taxes to pay for an army, and all major decisions required a unanimous vote. Meaning that, they could send the country to war, but they couldn't use taxes to raise money. So where do all our taxes come? Where do all our taxes come through? The IRS, the federal government. It's what you see on your paychecks every week, income tax, everything. They're the ones that have the power to take this money from you. Starts out seemingly innocent. So we're going to go way back here to James Madison in his pre-convention memorandum that delegates that because one could hardly expect the state legislatures to take enlightened views on national affairs, stronger central government was necessary. So in the beginning, there is a reason behind this. It's an important motive. It almost immediately dropped its original mandate and instead set about constructing a new Constitution of the United States. Once the convention concluded and released the Constitution for public consumption, the Federalist movement became focused on getting the Constitution ratified. This comes from the Federalist Papers, which many of you have heard of if you've taken history courses, a compilation of 85 anonymous essays published in New York City to convince the people of the state to vote for ratification. It was written by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. It examined the benefits of new proposed Constitution and analyzed the political theory and function behind the various articles of the Constitution. Still one of the most important documents in American political science. If you were opposed to the new Constitution, you became labeled as an anti-federalist. And these were generally local rather than broad-based in perspective because they wanted to keep more power in the states and not have the government as a whole have all this power over every state legislature. So they were broad-based in perspective. The anti-federalists were mostly on plantations and farms rather than commerce or finance, and they wanted strong state governments and a weak national government. The anti-federalist critique was centered around the absence of a Bill of Rights, which Federalists promised to provide. But they never got it there. The outgoing Congress of the Confederation scheduled elections for the new government, which was set on March 4th, 1789, as the date that the new government would take power. In 1789, Congress submitted 12 articles of amendment to these states. 10 of the articles, written by congressional committees, achieved passage on December 15, 1791, and became the United States Bill of Rights. The 10th Amendment set the guidelines for federalism in the United States. All right. So there is a reason why I'm going into these details, just so you can understand. All of these words that we're using here and all this history has a lot to do with Justice Scalia, because this is all what he believed and this is what he was a part of. He was a part of this government, and you have the federal government, rather. He was a huge advocate for it, and he had very, very strict, crucial opinions on things. So just as a couple of things here, I wanted to quickly explain how the federal government did get all of its control, and then Jess is going to talk a little bit about some of what Scalia stood for. So how did the federal government gain so much power? Because it started out as something seemingly helpful, but little by little, as you could see, it's been running everything in our country. So from 1861 to 1933, banks, and this is a key word, banks. You know the banks have all the money. They have tons of power. The banks had been regulated by the states, but the National Bank Acts of 1863 and 64 saw Congress establish a network of national banks that had their reserve requirements set by officials in Washington. During World War I, a system of federal banks devoted to aiding farmers was established, and a network of federal banks designed to promote home ownership came into existence in the last year of Herbert Hoover's administration. As early as 1913, there was talk of regulating stock exchanges, and the Capital Issues Committee, formed to control access to credit during World War I, recommended federal regulation of all stock issues and exchanges shortly before it ceased operating in 1921. During the Hoover administration, grants went to the states for the purpose of funding poor relief. But by 1933, okay, we all know the Great Depression occurred right prior to that. The precedents necessary for federal government to exercise broad regulatory power over all economic activity and spend for any purpose it saw fit were almost all in place. The only thing that remained was for the will to be brought to Congress and for the Supreme Court to allow it. So the Great Depression comes in, boom, changes all, marks a shift to a strong national government. And actually, the federal government thrived off the Great Depression to gain all the power it had. President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal policies, he reached out to the lives of U.S. citizens the way no other federal measure had. As the Supreme Court had rejected nearly all of Roosevelt's economic proposals, he then proposes to the Judicial Procedures Reform Bill of 1937 to add more members. So he couldn't get what he wanted to be passed, so he puts a bill out there to add more members. The expansion of the court with a Democrat-controlled Congress tilts the court rulings in the favor of Roosevelt's policies, so he gets what he wants. The national government is forced to cooperate with all levels of government to implement the New Deal policies. Local government earned an equal standing with other layers, and the federal government relied on political machines at a city level to bypass state legislatures. And basically, in cooperative federalism, federal funds are distributed through grants in aid or categorical grants, which give the federal government more control over the use of money. And then another movement, this is a little bit in the last of history, called New Federalism appears in the late 20th century and early 21st century. New Federalism is characterized by a gradual return of power to the states, and that was initiated by President Ronald Reagan from 81 to 89 during his term, and he had a devolution revolution, he called it. But the Reagan administration, though, did introduce the practice of giving block grants, freeing state governments to spend money at their own discretion. This worked till 2001, which, as we know, is an extremely important year in the history of the United States, without me having to go into details about that just yet.
We're definitely going to get into that.
Oh, yeah.
Future show. Don't worry about that.
No, we will definitely be covering September
So
11th.
some of the things that Scalia advocated, Scalia was a textualist, which that is the theory of the interpretation of law, holding that a legal text's ordinary meaning should govern its interpretation, as opposed to inquiries into non-textual sources such as the intention of the legislature in passing the law, the problem it was intended to remedy, or I can't talk today, substantive.
You can do it, Jess.
Questions.
You've been doing it.
Of the justice rectitude of the law. And he also advocated judicial interpretation, and that's the theory that explains how the judiciary should interpret the law. Now, so this I thought was really interesting. Okay, so he advocated how, like, the Supreme Court has the power to overturn laws made by the legislature in a process called judicial review. The court can decide on such matters as the legality of slavery, Roe v. Wade, which that was the abortion law.
Right.
And Brown versus Board of Education, which was the segregation law.
Correct, yeah.
He was against affirmative action. We all know, I guess.
Well, he was all about keeping the powers of the executive branch and the presidential, and said that presidential power should always be dominant over everything else. He was a huge advocate for that. That was one of his something he was known for, that he thrived off of. He was a justice on a power trip, and he really did have his strong opinions, which people agreed with and didn't agree with.
So,
as every opinion.
Speaking of, getting into that. So he was a devout Catholic.
Right.
All right. So here's a big case that Scalia was assigned to, ended up recusing himself from. Okay. The Elk Grove Unified School District versus Newdow. And that was regarding the Pledge of Allegiance in schools, because in the Pledge of Allegiance, it says in one nation under God. And the Newdow family got upset because they were atheists, and they thought that it impeded on their rights, or their religious or lack thereof religious rights in schools. So because he was a devout Catholic, he ended up having to recuse himself, because he did have strong opinions on that. And he also recused himself from Vice President Cheney versus the district court case, which concerned whether Vice President Cheney could keep the secret membership task force of the energy policy or not, because Scalia had gone hunting with with those.
I don't know if he went hunting with Cheney, but if we've known anything from history, it's don't go hunting with Dick Cheney.
Don't ever go hunting with Dick Cheney.
If you do, don't stand in front of him.
Nope. Or anywhere near him.
Yeah, but either way, yeah.
Because bullets just tend to fly around in circles and hit people.
Yeah, by magical.
Yeah.
Well, I had you confused with a deer. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Like your antlers, Jess. But he did have some really oh man, we have fun on this show. That's the idea. As serious is what we're talking about, you still have fun,
right?
So like we were saying, Jess went into some details about what he stood for. He opposed affirmative action and other policies which treated minorities as special groups. He was actually criticized a lot for that because he had strong opinions. He criticized the court's majority and his minority opinions. He used a lot of hurtful language. Like he was just that guy that just would say how he felt and just didn't care, And in a way, I mean, I think it's sometimes better to not beat around the bush. Anyone who knows me knows I like to tell it like it is. But
I got that lecture from you today, actually.
You did. You and many others. So they were viewed clear lines of separation between legislative, executive, and judicial branches, with no branch allowed to exercise powers granted to any other branch. And in federalism cases, which are the cases that pit the power of the federal government against the states, he often took the state's position, which is actually really interesting because he was part of the Federalist Society, but still took a lot of the state's sides in a lot of these cases, which isn't so usual for his views. So he, like Jeff's saying, he took top positions on topics like firearm background checks, medical marijuana use, abortion, race, gender, and sexual orientation. He voted to strike down laws that made distinctions between race, gender, or sexual orientation. Now, it sounds bad for him doing this, but the reason why he did it, I understand his idea. I just don't think it's taken the right way. The reason why he did this...
What does that sound like?
Oh, gee, I wonder. Sounds a lot like people are misquoting someone, but...
I guess we'll get into that closer to the election.
Yes, we will. So
we might be hated after that, but...
More than we may be now by some people.
We're going to be, yeah.
That's cool. So... So anyways, back on topic, Scalia, the reason why he wanted to strike down these laws that would make distinctions between race, gender, and sexual orientation was because he believed that to pursue the concept of racial entitlement, even for the most admirable and benign of purposes, is to reinforce and preserve for future mischief the way of thinking that produced race slavery, race privilege, and race hatred. In the eyes of the government, we are just one race here. It is American. So his idea behind it, I understand, is to try to just not take into account.
It's the execution.
Basically. Yeah. The execution of everything. It's the way.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
Because he was a judge.
I get it. I see what you're getting at.
I'm a little goofy today.
A little bit. What did you take before you came in here, Jess?
A lot of coffee.
A lot of coffee. All right. Well, I had half a cup because I dropped it outside.
Valentis coffee.
Yes, Valentis coffee. Name drop.
Yeah.
Right there. So for those of you who don't know, Jess does have a coffee commercial that is becoming all the rage, kind of, on KCOR Radio Network. And it's coffee, not coffee, as I say it, which we have to clarify for everyone, since I have the accent. But Scalia, again, argued that laws that make distinction between genders should be subjugated to intermediate scrutiny and must further government interest. And he also believed the death penalty is extremely constitutional, with strict views even for underage violators, which is interesting, meaning if you're under the age of 18 and you murder people, he was all about the death penalty and using in most cases, which, is kind of hard for a lot of people to swallow. That's a tough one, and I kind of understand that.
I read something today that was Scalia out of the way? On the commonsenseshow.com, they said Scalia's death marks the end of the Constitution as we know it, and it said with Scalia out of the way, it limits free speech the limits on free speech will be restored, but the death penalty will be ruled unconstitutional. I thought that going into
he was one of the I think that makes sense if he was one of the main advocates for it. He had a lot of people that I think specifically were on his side just because of how he was. And from what I've heard and read, he had a way about him of kind of getting his way, swaying people to his side in the way he spoke. And when you can do that, you can think about any of the most famous public speakers in history. When you have that ability to sway people just by the way you talk and what you say, it kind of says a lot. You can kind of do whatever you want. This is how people gain so much power. Any dictator in history has gained power that way. It's not a good thing necessarily. And I'm not saying everything he did was bad, but the reason we're going into this is because we want you to kind of get an idea for who he was, where he came from,
and the motive.
And the motives behind what could have ultimately led to his death.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
It wasn't, okay, when I first heard about this, I was like, well, the man was 80. The man was 80.
The man was, just about. I think he was going to be 80 in March.
Well, it is March. So
well, now
he was
80.
80.
Now it is.
He was 80. That's like...
We'll just round up.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But anyways, he was 80 years old. He died of natural causes, but they said it was reported that he was in really good spirits, like not really expecting
to die,
to kick the bucket.
Yeah,
right then and there.
Not that we really hope anybody's expecting to die.
No, but when you're some people, they know when if they're sick or it just. It was just way too sudden for anybody to really think it was natural causes. And when we come back in the second half, we're going to get into all the weirdness behind like when his body was found or the way it was found and the protocols, and once again getting into the corruption of our law enforcement.
The corruption of our justice system, which is pretty much
kind of been like the main topic of like every show we've ever done.
It's funny too, because that wasn't even the initial idea that we had when we were going into this show, and it just seems like we found so many loopholes and all these murders in history and all this sketchy stuff that's been going on.
Basically, the Manitowoc Police Department has been involved in everything. That's every murder case that's ever. Yes.
Just blame Manitowoc County.
We just blame Manitowoc. That's where everybody got their training from.
I'm sure at this point they're just taking it in every way, shape, or form they can, because everybody I think hates that county.
Right.
But
so if you guys want to give us a call. Our number is 702-425-9230. Like I said, once again, we're going to get back into, once we come back for the second half, we're going to get into the controversy behind his death and why it was so
And do feel
weird.
free to call in if you have any thoughts on this. We know this is a current event. It's something that just happened. We know we're going to get into some really controversial stuff in the second half. That includes discussing Obama. And we have to name drop that now. So please, for the love of God, don't go anywhere. Stay tuned for some more Reality Check with Jessica Johns and Joey Mirabella.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere.
It's time to flip this iceberg and expose the truth.
This is gonna be good.
Welcome back to your daily dose of reality. To share your thoughts on the truth, call the KCOR Digital Radio Network at 702-425-9230.
Are you deaf?
That's 702-425-9230. Those around the world use Skype name KCOR Radio. Tweet your thoughts anytime to KCOR at KCOR Radio using hashtag KCOR. Enter the world of live chat at www.kcorradio.com.
Oh, that sounds dangerous.
Once again, it's time to cross that line of deception and bring you a reality check.
They're serious. They mean what they're saying.
With your mesmerizing hosts, Jessica Johns and Joey Mirabella.
All right, welcome back, folks. That's right, we are crossing that line of deception again in week 7 for a reality check for all of you. This second half will definitely be
the Secret Service is going to be waiting outside the door,
and we're ready to greet them with open arms because we just love everybody so much. So, Jess, there is someone that I think you should intro since he's very, very tied to you.
It's been a while since we've
seen your smile.
So let's go ahead and bring him back.
Is that Papa John's on the line?
Papa, wow,
Papa
dude.
John's.
Easy on the Papa thing, dude.
I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it.
And we're not talking about the pizza.
No, we're not. We're talking about the father of Just
No, we're
John's.
not doing that. You guys, this was a real controversial issue, and you guys kind of hit me in my wheelhouse with this guy. So I want to just kind of let you in on a couple things, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because you have a lot to talk about and not a whole lot of time. So a couple things. First of all, did you guys know that he believed in the devil?
No, he was a devout Catholic.
Yeah, he was.
Well,
if you're going to some of
that.
Catholicism, yeah,
well,
we're not
Joey's
gonna-
Catholic
He also believed in the devil.
Where did you now? How do you know that? Where did you find
That's
that
a
out?
fact. No. From watching, and I'm generally not one of those guys that takes everything I see on political TV as gospel because, as you know, it's not.
Right. No, that's.
But too many people said the same thing from news station to news station to news station. So
we
he was
believe
a
in
firm
heaven and hell
believer
as
in the
Catholic.
devil, whether or not he was Catholic. I mean, and that's okay. You can be Catholic, and you can spread your belief. It's kind of like being a Scientologist. You're not giving up your religion. You're just joining the Scientology.
Right.
Because Scientology, as you know, is not a religion, but that's another story altogether. But here's the other thing that was interesting about Antonin Scalia. When you guys were talking about the death penalty, he absolutely believed that the death penalty is constitutional. In fact, this is how far he went with that. If there was a murder committed by somebody of the age of 18 or younger, he believed that that person should be susceptible to the death penalty as well. So if a 16-year-old went out and did a mass killing, he should be condemned to die in the electric chair or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
He had no bars on that. He's
No, he didn't.
Right.
His attitude was so aggressive. I would shudder to think what would have happened if he ran for president at this point in time, and what would have happened to anybody that committed a crime. Now, you can look at that good or bad. You can say, you know what, if we get caught, Scalia's going to have us in the chair and we're dead. So do we really want to do this? So naturally, there would be some kind of reluctance on that. However, a lot of the states took over, and there's many precedents about this, and they all said, look, if the kid's a killer, we're not going to execute him. We're just going to put him in jail for the rest of his life. And a lot of states do that, as opposed to going into capital punishment. So he was really aggressive. He was careless. He was everything that you probably don't want your dad to be. You know, he just didn't care. If you committed a crime, the punishment has to fit the crime regardless of how old you are. You can look at that good or bad or indifferent.
Right.
But that's just the way this guy was. He was smart. He was cum laude as a Boy Scout. I mean, this guy's smart, or was. So he had an incredible amount of intelligence. He was kind of laid back, but those looks just fooled a lot of people. One of his classmates was a congresswoman named Maureen Dowd. She described Antonin Scalia as the Archie Bunker in a high-backed chair.
I actually heard that. Yeah,
that's kind of laid back.
I heard that. Yeah.
Okay, so
it's a funny comparison.
There's many more comparisons to this guy's attitude. However, it's just important to note that while everybody is putting this guy on a pedestal, I'm not sure that he actually belonged there.
Well, you know what's interesting? It's making sense to me now when you said that he believed in the devil, because he was part of a secret society.
Yes.
Yes.
That was and that's why I brought in all that history of federalism and everything that he was part of, is because that is also directly tied to those societies.
He was found. Well, that's like he was found in Texas, with those with the secret society. He had gone hunting. He was staying for free.
Yeah.
In a resort hotel, or it's not necessarily like a hotel. It was like a resort, like hunting hotel.
Yeah, out in Shafter, Texas. That's northwest Texas. Yep.
Right. So that would make sense.
Yeah. No, he has those kinds of roots. You know, I'm not in any way saying that he was a good person. That's not what the message that, you know, we've been trying to get through.
I know you guys aren't.
Yeah.
What's good about listening to you guys is that you guys don't really put him one way or the other. You're just telling the story like it is.
Right.
That's very admirable. Do you guys know who Barney Frank is?
No.
Okay. Barney Frank is probably one of the only openly gay congressmen.
Okay.
Now, he described Antonin Scalia as a homophobe. Okay.
We'll get through this, and then we got to cut you off to get back into the show.
Because
I want to hear what you're going to say about this real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go on.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
You're good.
So I'll take about 30 seconds of your time. But he didn't like homosexuals either. He wanted to take all of their rights away.
That's part of being the devout Catholic.
They couldn't do anything.
Right.
So, but anyway, I'm going to let you guys get back to your show. I'm going to listen until it's over. Enjoyed it. You guys take care.
Thank you.
Dad.
Thanks, Papa John's.
That's your new nickname.
Right.
We have a question from Twitter.
Yeah, we have Ryan actually from Vegas, and he posted, it's probably a response to your dad, but he said, Scalia, his comments were taken out of context. If you believe in the Bible, which, you know, a lot of people who are Christian, if you believe in God, you believe in the devil.
Well, that was my first point.
Yeah, so what he's saying is, it goes, if you actually read what Scalia said, he doesn't say that he believes in the devil. He says he believes the devil is at work, but he is a very Christian person, but he just makes references to that, you know, the devil, that if you're an atheist.
Right.
So
right.
He
but
just
again,
wanted
secret
to know
societies.
I've heard some of the stuff he says about. I never heard him say that he worshiped the devil or believe in it. You know, I mean, you have to believe in the devil, like you said. If you're Catholic, that's just what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's the heaven, there's hell, there's God, there's the devil, there's the greater good, the greater evil. That's it. That's
right. Well, we have to believe in the
nutshell.
devil if we're going to perform exorcisms.
Obviously, Jess and her paranormal world over there.
Yeah, it's so funny because people used to all the time say to me, you know, well, you're Catholic. Why do you want ghosts? Well, hello, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. What the hell?
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah. Well,
so getting back into this, are we going to get into how he was found?
Yeah, we have to go into immediately his death, and then we're going to give you the synopsis of what we found to be the reason why he died. And yes, we do believe
Joey's
that he
mind-blowing moment at the very end.
Yes, there is one. So, Jess, why don't you talk about how the body was found?
Okay.
And everything about it.
So the body was found. Well, this was really interesting. Okay, so the body was found by the owner of the Cibolo Creek Ranch, where Scalia was found, and that guy was a Democratic Party mega donor, and his name was John Poindexter, which I really think is a fake name. Come on, whose last name is Poindexter? From like John. That's like saying Mr. Smith.
Whose last
name is
Poindexter?
Smith. Right. But he was among those who initially discovered the body and then coordinated with the local officials to have Justice Scalia declared dead via a phone conversation with the area medical examiner. But without an actual medical examination of the body,
None. No medical examination of the body whatsoever.
How can you tell?
For a Supreme Court justice of the country, take that into account. If someone dies, especially because he had the pillow.
Right. He was found with a pillow over his head without any apparent witnesses. Scalia was described as having been in good spirits in the hours prior to his death. Now, John Poindexter, he was also said to be the primary point man between the ranch location and the federal authorities, who were notably slow to arrive on the scene. Now,
of course they were.
Another crazy point is that a non-homicide trained U.S. Marshal came to the scene and told the Justice of the Peace that no foul play was observed. But if he's not trained in that area,
that was Judge Guevara, right?
How do you know? Yes.
Yes.
So Justice of the Peace Guevara pronounced death while not even being on the scene and without any medical training. How can he say that the justice died of a heart attack?
And the answer is you can't. You can't just say that. So it was handled with no professionalism. The body was not even cremated till the judge made this determination, but no one else looked at the body. No doctors, no RNs were in attendance. So they're just saying it was the result of a heart attack without an autopsy, no doctor present, no RN in attendance,
Right.
and that's it.
So how can the marshal say without a thorough post-mortem that he was not injected with an illegal substance that would simulate a heart attack?
Right.
The heart attack gun.
Yes, this is interesting. There is a device called the heart attack gun, which is a supposedly secret. It's kind of gotten out, but it's something the CIA has used for years, I guess. Shoots a tiny dart that can pierce through clothing, leaves no trace. It causes a heart attack only seconds later. The dart's laced with poison, disintegrates after piercing the skin before the person shot has a heart attack. Something that's not traceable. It actually causes a heart attack. There are lots of types of technology and weapons that we don't know about that is used. I promise you that. We're not going to get into more than just that, but that is a potential idea of what could have been used to have him assassinated, assuming that is what happened.
Now,
and again, like Jess says, he has a pillow over his face when he's found. But for someone to be found with a pillow over their face and not get a proper investigation, who's a justice of the Supreme Court, which is extremely high up in our country, makes no sense whatsoever. Especially because he was a justice of the Supreme Court. Makes no sense.
He didn't have federal protection. His federal protection was removed while he was at that ranch, so he didn't have any security detail on him at all. And his body was found promptly after his body was found. It was moved to the Sunset Funeral Home and immediately cremated.
Just immediately.
Immediately.
Now, what I did hear just recently, very recently, is that he said in his will he wanted his body cremated. I mean, that's what his lawyer said. That could be true.
He didn't want
an
autopsy.
Not be. Well, you also have to. Well, he didn't want an autopsy. He just wanted to be cremated. But it's just the fact that they did
quick.
that so quick, and for a Catholic to want to be cremated is against Catholic beliefs. Catholics don't believe in being cremated. We know what they believe in. They believe in having a burial, a funeral, the whole shebang. They still did that, but they believe that there's a wake, the body has to be present, and it's just interesting the way they fast forwarded through all this just to get to where they wanted to be without any investigation. It made no sense whatsoever. So
let's get into real quick. I want to tap into really quickly the secret society.
Yes, this is the secret society that we believe had something to do with his death. Go ahead.
Now,
Jess.
these groups, the group's members of the secret society were no quote average Joes. They were leaders of they were leaders of a centuries-old secret fraternity of hunters called the International Order of Saint Huberus, and it was founded in the 1600s Austria. And the group slogan, y'all are gonna have to bear with me here because I don't speak Spanish.
You should. We work at Chayo.
It's not. Well, the joke is it's not in Spanish. This is like in German.
Okay, I don't speak German.
Yeah, it's Diem Diligit.
Should I help you with that word?
Yes,
Jess?
you should.
Where is it?
You should help me with that.
Diem Diligit Animalia Diligentes.
Thank you.
Something like that.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Which means, let's do the English version, Jess.
Okay,
that's the easier one to say. Honoring
God by honoring his creatures. And it was a male-only society, and they wear dark green robes.
Which is interesting. That kind of sounds like it's tied to Skull and Bones,
right?
Which is the secret, which isn't really a secret anymore, society at Yale University, which the Bush family, which Jesus Sr. was a member of, and a couple others came from there as well. So I don't know if that's the society. I have no way to prove that. It sounds like that's tied to that society. It could be one of the other higher up societies. Either way, he was with this group, part of it, with them right before he dies, and boom, no investigation. Keep in mind, these people, insanely wealthy. And as we learned in this country, you can pay anybody off to get what you want. Unfortunately, most people are corrupt. That's just the way it works. It's not right, but it's the way things go.
Speaking of, I think we should get into the Joey mind-blowing moment of the night.
The Joey mind-blowing moment.
Because, okay,
do I get a drum roll for that one? No.
No. So, okay, but let's think about this for a second.
Let's think about it.
Who has the most to gain from Scalia's death? Obama?
I would say
Hillary Clinton? Both?
Well, let's take an exploration into this.
Okay.
Because this is what we aim to figure out.
All right.
There is someone named Michael Savage who is a host of the Savage Nation radio talk show. He says that Scalia was likely murdered, and we did get some information from an article that was written on the website. saying that we had a razor-thin savior of the conservative, or shall I say, traditional ways in America, Antonin Scalia, who was found dead under suspicious circumstances, he said, and now this character in the White House, who nobody with a rational mind should trust, is trying to railroad Loretta Lynch down our throats as his number one choice. Can you believe this? We know who the character he's talking about is in the White House, since there should only be one right now. So I'm going to go into something David Hodges discussed on the Common Sense Show, which is also something we got some of our information from. This is why Scalia was killed or potentially killed. What was the motive behind getting rid of this guy? Besides his strong opinions, everyone has a strong opinion. So, Obama's put into office to end capitalism, private property ownership, and the individual's right to self-determination. This is speculated. This is the main reason Obama was even put into office, because he was really virtually not even that well known within a decade before that. And this has to do with going through Agenda 21, which is something people have heard about. It seems innocent. It has a lot of interesting things hidden within it. Google that. Look up Agenda 21. There's way too much on it for me to get into. But they also call this technocracy, which is basically the takeover of all energy use, which ultimately would take over all finance through programs such as CO2 emissions. So basically, Obama, when he first came in the office, 2009, tries to introduce legislation to cut energy use by 80%. And this was entirely rejected by the conservative members of the Supreme Court by a 5-4 defeat. Scalia was the main opponent. And this has to do with the COP21 agreements in Paris. That Jess has a little bit of information on what the COP21 agreements in Paris are. She's going to give a quick synopsis of that.
Okay, so for the first time in 20 years, and over 20 years, the UN is in negotiations aiming to achieve a legally binding and universal agreement on climate with the aim of keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. There was a conference held on December 12th, 2015, and 186 countries published their action plan. Each plan sets out the way in which they intend to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The Paris Agreement therefore asked all countries to review these contributions every 5 years, beginning from the year 2020. The agreement acknowledges that $100 billion in loans and donations will need to be raised each year from 2020 to finance projects that enable countries to adapt to the impacts of the climate change or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that was December 12th. So coming up in April, there's actually another, they're voting on it, I think, in April.
Okay.
In New York.
So we're told as of right now. So that's just basically what the COP21 agreements in Paris were. And another thing that Hodges was discussing, this has to do with the Gulf oil explosion in 2010. Okay, which we all remember.
This is that mind-blowing moment I was mentioning.
This is where things are going to get a little crazy here. So following this explosion, Hodges wrote a 7-part series called The Great Gulf Coast Holocaust. And he discovered in this that Obama, when still a state senator for Illinois, Valerie Jarrett and Al Gore, they headed the Joyce Foundation, which is a foundation designed to promote acceptance for carbon trading schemes, and ultimately, the ultimate goal is to gain control over the entire economy. They just wrap it up in, bubble wrap and fluff it up with bows, and they make it sound like it's something appealing without you reading the fine print. The Joyce Foundation set up the Chicago Climate Exchange in 2003, which was the nation's first official carbon trading company. In 2009, when Obama's original carbon trading scheme was rejected, it didn't stop him from continuing to try to get it passed. The Joyce Foundation was involved in bringing together NALCO, or the NALCO, Goldman Sachs, and the EPA in allowing the oil dispersant Corexit to be used in the Gulf, even though, for health reasons, it had been banned, by nearly the entire G20 nations. So let me just explain a little bit. NALCO, which was started in Naperville, Illinois, and based on the supplier of water, energy, and air improvement solutions and services for industrial and institutional markets. EPA is the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which was started by President Nixon in 1970 as an agency of the U.S. federal government. Keyword there, federal government controls it. And then what is Corexit? Corexit is a product line of oil dispersants used during an oil spill. It allows oil to be rapidly degraded by bacteria and prevents it from accumulating on beaches and marshes. However, it is proven that this is an extremely toxic substance to wildlife and to human beings. It should not be used. It's banned in a lot of places, but they still used it during this oil spill. And they made a tremendous profit off of it, including Obama himself directly made a huge profit off of this. Okay? So they want this to be passed. They're trying to fix the environment, yet they're doing some sketchy things and using some things that are well known to be poisonous. The state of Louisiana even wrote a letter to Barack Obama telling him to stop using this because it was polluting Louisiana. And that is extremely important, but obviously that was disregarded. So when Obama became involved in the Joyce Foundation, this is key here, George Soros and David Rockefeller.
Yeah, this is where
Rockefeller, the oil conglomerate company that is ruthlessly been doing a lot of terrible things, and his company, they backed Obama to be president when he was still unknown, because he was chosen since he would willingly hand over the entire economy to a few wealthy bankers under the appearance of climate change. That was the goal there. Under the appearance of climate change, he would hand it right over to them if he could get this passed. So who didn't allow it to get passed? Scalia, the main one. He had his way of talking and swaying people. He was the main one. Now, this is interesting because this kind of parallels to a situation in 1912.
Ooh.
When Woodrow Wilson was going to run for president. Okay, we're going to go, this is back right during the Industrial Revolution, or right over the course of that, when banksters wanted to back Woodrow Wilson for president. Why did they do that? Well, the following year, the banking system was handed to the Rockefellers, and the rest is now history. And that is what I would like you to know. The banking system, our banking system, was handed over to the Rockefellers in 1913. They have virtually controlled all the money in this country for a very long time, over a century now. And they were still trying to, they backed Obama to get this passed. So why? So that they could also control the economy.
Oh.
Which they've been doing.
Pretty much doing.
So they own the finances, they control the banks, the oil company controls the banks. That makes no sense, but that's what's been happening. And then they want to control the economy. That is what I would like to call absolute power, and that is the kind of stuff you see in like James Bond movies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where's Bond?
Where's
my question.
Bond in all
where's
of
James
this?
Bond?
Where's? Or wait, Daniel Craig or Pierce Brosnan?
I'm gonna go with Daniel Craig
Oh.
for sure. He's definitely the most badass one out of all of them.
Yeah.
So that is our exploration of as to why Scalia was ultimately
I can't believe
murdered.
we got through it.
Neither can
I honestly thought it was literally going to take 2 shows, but we got through it.
And we even had time for Papa John's.
We did. That's what we're going to call it.
I'm kind of hungry now. I kind of want to order some real Papa John's.
Oh, man.
So we hope you enjoyed the show, folks. This was, I know it's a lot of information, a lot of things people aren't going to agree with. I challenge you and welcome you to please look up some of the information that I've put out there and that Jess and I have found, because these are real things. We're not making this up off the top of our head.
Come see Joey and I at Chayo tomorrow. Get some tacos.
And that too.
Yeah, we're working tomorrow. Come see us.
Try not to argue with us about what we're talking about.
Oh man! And we will see everybody next week. Make sure you find us on Facebook and Twitter. And you guys have an awesome weekend.
Have a good night, folks. See you next week.
Stand by.
You've been listening to Reality Check, the one show that doesn't prepackage and spin the truth as propaganda. Hosted by Jessica Johns and Joey Mirabella.